Frank Jameson is not insane legally. Frank Jameson is mentally ill, but he knows what he is doing. His conduct has been willful. Frank Jameson tries to defend or justify his actions and his conduct and behavior. A person who is legally insane does not do that. If nobody else could get away with what he does, then Frank Jameson shouldn't either. Frank Jameson should not be prosecuted for violating federal law at interstate communications in the United States Code, then nobody else should have either, including Anthony Alonis. Frank Jameson, a narcissistic, mentally defective psychopath. He is deficient, dysfunctional, degenerate, delusional, disturbed, deranged. And he is not harmless just because he is senseless. He should not get away with anything that anyone else would not be able to get away with. Hi everyone, well, I have put it out in the video saying it before, and I will say it again, that there is a song for Frank Jameson to sing often, and that song is a hymn. That is a well-known hymn. The hymn is Amazing Grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. And there's more verses to that, of course, in the hymn Amazing Grace, but that's the part that's easy to remember. Now, that is a song that Frank Jameson should sing at least every week and preferably every day. Frank William Jameson of Farmington Hills, Michigan, and I'm Lawrence Albert Connor in Virginia Beach, Virginia. That's my message for him again. So put yourself in my position. If you were the person that Frank Jameson has wronged so many times for so long, would you be able to be any more effective and successful at dealing with it or not? Should be able to get away with wronging you in criminal offenses or not? Okay? Frank Jameson, okay, in the Bible it says, a tree is known by its fruit. Judge Frank Jameson according to that. Okay? A fool folds his hand and eats his flesh. Judge Frank Jameson according to that. Alright? Frank Jameson just believes what he wants to. Imagine that a person themselves is the one who defines whether they have committed offenses or not. That's not the right way to do it, but that's how it works with Frank Jameson. He just believes what he wants to. Okay? Regardless of right or wrong. I have said it before of what he's like, that he is a pathological liar who exhibits a psychological projection, and so much more, as I will continue. So what would you do if Frank Jameson has committed many repeated instances of criminal offenses against you for several years? Forget about it and let him get away with it? That's the wrong thing to do. He has harassed other people in the past, and he harasses other people in the future because he has gotten away with it before. Letting him get away with it allows him to continue to commit offenses and harassing other people in the future. Why, it's exactly the wrong thing to do. A tree is known by its fruit. A fool folds his hand and eats his flesh. Those things are the right way to think about Frank Jameson. He's not the person who defines whether he has committed offenses or not. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. I've said it before that Frank Jameson is a pathological liar who exhibits psychological projection. I say that he is a narcissistic, mentally defective psychopath, and that's also true. Those aren't made up things. They certainly are not empty insults. They apply correctly and honestly about Frank Jameson. Continue. So my conflict with Frank Jameson of Michigan is not a joke. I'm Lawrence Albert Connor in Virginia Beach. My conflict with Frank William Jameson of Farmington Hills, Michigan is not a joke. It's serious. It's well known over the internet. It's publicly visible, and it's a long-standing conflict for several years where he commits many repeated instances of criminal offenses for several years. Okay? What would you have done about it? Let him get away with it? That's not right. So I have said over and over, he's a mental defective. It's true that he fits the meaning for the terms, and that's not an empty insult. So Frank Jameson is deficient and dysfunctional, degenerate, delusional, disturbed, and deranged. Those aren't empty insults. They're correct and true about him. Also, that he is a narcissistic, mentally defective psychopath. Not an insult. Just plain correct and just plain true. Frank Jameson is not harmless just because he is senseless. Frank Jameson is hateful and harmful. He absolutely is not harmless just because he is senseless. Frank William Jameson of Farmington Hills, Michigan. Absolutely hateful, absolutely harmful. Frank William Jameson of Farmington Hills, Michigan. He just believes what he wants to believe. He is impervious to any sense and any reason. He is incorrigible and irredeemable. Frank Jameson is oblivious to reality. Frank Jameson is impervious to any sense. Frank Jameson is impervious to any reason. He just believes what he wants to believe. Frank Jameson is oblivious to reality. Frank Jameson is incorrigible. Frank Jameson is irredeemable. If nobody else could get away with any of it, he should not be able to either. So Frank Jameson himself wants to be the bully that gets away with harassing other people. But if other people give him any of his business at him in return with criticizing him or putting him down, he cries bullying and harassing. But Frank Jameson wants to be the bully himself that gets away with harassing other people. Frank Jameson is like the pot calling the kettle black. Frank Jameson claims that anyone who calls him a loser is like the worst person in the world. But Frank Jameson calls other people loser himself. And everything else that Frank Jameson does, he's projecting, he's a liar, he's a narcissist, he's a psychopath, he's mentally defective. That's not a joke, it's not funny, and it shouldn't protect him. Now, the problem is not that Frankie Jameson is crazy, the problem are his offenses. He commits criminal offenses, and that's what matters, not that he is crazy. Crazy should not protect him. Frank Jameson is not the one who defines whether he has committed criminal offenses that should be acted on properly by holding himself accountable. No one else is either. If I committed criminal offenses, you wouldn't be able to get away with just denying it and saying that I feel justified, and then everyone in the law enforcement and the justice system is entirely impotent. Frank Jameson knows how to play law enforcement and the police for fools. His suicidal gestures and episodes are toxic manipulation in order to avoid and evade problems and trouble of some kind. But Frank Jameson swings between threatening to kill himself and threatening to kill others many times for several years. Frank Jameson is a problem person, and letting him get away with stuff that no one else should get away with is exactly the wrong thing to do. Frank Jameson has an obsession with and delusions about the actress Miranda Cosgrove. He has denied that many times for several years, even though I have truthfully pointed it out about him starting several years ago. But then he keeps going back to behavior from himself that demonstrates it as being true time and time again, over and over again. So just like anything else from Frank Jameson, it makes that much sense. It makes no sense. Frank Jameson calls other people, besides myself, pedos and chomos. Okay? It's psychological projection. Frank Jameson is a pathological liar. He exhibits psychological projection. People ought to care about and be concerned with whether he is possibly an offender of that nature himself. If a crime can be committed over the internet, then treating it as such and responding to it as such depends on nothing more than that. But the system wants to act as if that's true sometimes when they want to. This case of mine against Frank Jameson, the system wants to ignore it for a number of reasons. Internet threats, they don't want to deal with that categorically for that reason alone. He's crazy. That's another reason they don't want to go after it. It's interstate. That's another reason they don't want to go after it. But the standard to convict for true threats is only the intent to threaten. And it's not as much as you think it is. And also, being crazy doesn't protect him completely. There is such a thing as a court ruling guilty but mentally ill. GBMI. And Frank fits guilty but mentally ill. Learn it.